I'm your host, Perry Kinkaide, representing the KEI Network. The topic today is about pitching. I've asked Mark Benning to serve as a moderator and 3 panelists who he'll introduce and give them an opportunity to speak. Mark, you want to begin and start our session off?
It's all great. Thanks, Perry. I'm Mark Benning. I'm the one of the general partners of the Sprout Fund. We've raised a small fund to invest in Alberta and Western Canadian startup companies. And typically we'll look at pre-seed and seed stage companies for those investments. And I also was the host and creator of the Pitch Fest event, which was held a couple years ago in Edmonton for tech companies. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael Overtin. And Michael, I'll let you sort of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
And was trying to patent and work with a small company, but at the end of the day, it didn't pan out. The head of the tech transfer office was caught embezzling TTF money, went to prison. It was a nightmare. So I've been at the bad end of the spectrum, and I thought, well, we got to get this working. So I set up Science Capital, ran 20 events, had about 50 people come present business plans. I work with the private sector and public sector, had a lot of fun, but changing culture is difficult. And so at the end of the day, I said, let's go to Alberta, let's do it right. So I set up Discovery Lab. I asked about 50 PIs, what's happening? What do we need to do better? They said, IP is difficult. How do I protect with no money? And how do I get money? And so I said, well, let's figure it out. Let's gather people with money and with great ideas and business acumen. And so we've run now 22 events. We've had about 235 people pitch, great teams. Deborah and I were on a committee, and we said about 3 years ago, let's have one company present and succeed and have one fail safely, but early, because you want to fail early rather than have to struggle for years and go nowhere. And in the end, what we've done is had 235 plus teams present, and about half of them don't make it, but that's fine. They come back stronger, they come up with a new plan, and it's been terrific. Academics basically want to do the right thing. They want to improve the world, and they need some support because getting out in the street is not easy. It's a messy place. And so having the right support is the critical thing. So we try and line up business mentors, angels, VCs. We've been able to assemble a panel with about $3 billion of funding that they want to invest. And all I got to do is call up more investors and they'll come online. So the money isn't the hard part. The most valuable thing is the ideas in people's heads, including the people here, and finding a way to unlock that value by building a team that can really carry it through the market. And so we try and really optimize that experience so we can really build trust and relationship between people with brilliant ideas that they want to bring to market and those people with the skills and market knowledge, industry connections to get there. And it's been a lot of fun. We have one event every quarter. It doesn't cost a penny. You can tell your story. All you got to do is give me a 2-page business plan. If it looks good, you get the slot. And the advisors give their time because they also care about the community. People care about Alberta. And so if we can work together just to get 1 or 2 advisors helping 1 or 2 teams every event, and then we multiply that by 100, pretty soon we've got a great community. So we now have about 230 alumni, and they're all, I think, enjoying finding ways to innovate in their own way. We don't have a structured program. We've unstructured as much as possible because I do this in my spare time. So we keep it really simple. You just tell your story, you get some feedback, you follow up your leads, and then you come back when you've made some progress, you tell your story again, and every iteration hopefully you get stronger and you bring some more friends on your team. And before you know it, you've got a success. Some of our companies have gone on to raise millions of dollars, and it's just been a great success. We don't try and own that success. We're just pleased when they do well. So we want to keep on growing. And next year we have plans to continue to grow. We're looking for some funding, some sponsors, so that we can pay the people who do the work. But in the meantime, we're doing quarterly events and just having a great time doing it. So thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions. We have such great talent here on this call, and I'd really like to learn from your experiences, find out ways that we could work with you and the people that you work with.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that overview. Our next person I'd like to introduce is Rus Matichuk. Rus, could you give us a little bit about your background as well as the pitch event that you've hosted in the past?
Sure. It's quite a few years ago that we launched something called Venture Prize. Some of you might know about it. I'll talk about it in just a second in the genesis of that. But my name is Rus Matichuk. Been involved in a number of industry associations over the years, had senior roles in either launching and growing them, as well as a number of companies. I've raised a lot of capital for companies that I've been involved in, and have progressed and became an investor, invested in some companies, and worked also in some companies in senior leadership roles of some magnitude. So I've had a broad spectrum of experience, and look forward to sharing a little bit of that. And also, as Michael mentioned, learning from some of the people at the table here today. In terms of the pitching side, we launched Venture Prize quite a while back when angel investing and other initiatives were quite meager, and designed a program that had a few attributes to it, had some mentors, had some education, and had some and had some specific investors that were key to the process of ultimately judging and screening deals. So it was a multifaceted program, and that some of you might be familiar with it. It continued on for quite a while, expanded, and has recently been kind of wound down to some degree as a result of some changing things at Economic Edmonton Development Corporation, but also also in the industry. There's more and more of these type of activities that have been spawned and are doing some great things. Zach, we've worked with recently, and
Thanks, Perry. And thanks, Rus. Appreciate that overview and introduction. I'd like to ask you two guys sort of a basic question. What do you think it takes to make a successful pitch? So these are founders that are coming in, they're presenting their company, their idea. What is it? What's the key thing that makes a successful pitch? Michael, let's start with you.
Sure, it's a good question. And we have a very unstructured approach. We want to see people as they are, so we don't actually coach them. We just say, tell your story. You got 15 minutes and tell us what you want to do, how you want to get there, and what you need, basically. And so in the end of the day, people invest in people. And often people have a couple great ideas, and they can only work on one or two of them at a time. We want to know your best idea and find out really how we can help navigate the system. And so what we try and do is not have people do a sales pitch. We want to hear about your struggle. We want to hear about your pain, and we want to hear about where you want to go. And we want to figure out how we can help you. And so most of our teams are pretty early stage. We have a mix of people who present. Yesterday, there was a PhD student who gave a great pitch. He's on our website at discovery.ca. Some of them are CEOs leading companies that are looking to hire lots of people and looking for a couple $1 million. So it's a real mix. So I think everybody's looking for something different. Every company's different. Every team is different. What we want is authenticity. We want to hear your story, and it's got to be, there should be a convincing ask, something that we can actually hold on to. Like, do you want money? Do you want space? Are you looking for a person? So you should have clarity in your own mind about what it is you need, and then we can usually help you find it. So it's not always the money. At the end of the day, people need to find market traction. And so if you have some way to demonstrate that you have market traction, that's always a big plus. Usually scientists are looking to develop technology, but aren't as savvy about what the market needs. And so having some kind of a affinity or connection to the market, to the people, a clear idea of who that perfect customer is really helps, so they can describe how they can then reach that customer.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. I like that the authenticity is really important. And it's good to hear that it's not just money they're pitching for, but a range of different needs that they might have. How about you, Russ? What do you see in sort of the importance of what it takes to make a successful pitch?
Well, I'll come at it from a couple of different angles. One is the what people are thinking, and the other thing is what people are hearing. I'd say that often entrepreneurs come at it from 95% is what I say, and 5% is how I say it. And the reality is that that just isn't true. I'd say that it's more 50-50 what you say and how you say it. How you say it can have a material impact on whether or not people actually listen. You have to think about presentation decay as well. I think what happens is people think that I've got 10 slides and I've got to just get through them all, and the right points will resonate, and in the end, they'll remember the important ones. The reality is that an hour after, 50% of what you said is completely lost. 20% probably in a day is gone, and arguably in a week, there may be 10 points or one thing that people will remember. And so you got to really focus on, what's the big point that you want to get across? What's the second point and what's the third point? And everything else ultimately gets lost in a sea of information. Think really hard about the important messages. I think you can also get hung up in overthinking having the right slides. At the end of the day, there are three real important things that an investor needs to know. They need to know that you're going to have rapid and sustainable growth. They need to know that you're going to ultimately get to a significant size and be able to scale, and that you're going to have disproportionate profitability. They need to feel as if they're going to have a return for their investor. And I think some of those things get lost sometimes. So that some of the highlights, I'd say. Great.
How about on the flip side? What's the biggest fail you've seen, or the biggest mistake some founders have made in trying to pitch their idea? Russ, how about we start with you this time?
Sure. I'd say that there's, some of you have heard different versions of this, but I'd say that there's probably a number of lies that entrepreneurs tell, if you will, or tell to themselves, and ultimately that translates into into their presentation. And I'll run through a few of them. I'd say the first one is that our projections are conservative. Let me just run through them. Some of them are self-explanatory in terms of what I think are material. The next one is our target market is $1 billion. That we have a world-class team. That our average sales cycle is 90 days. We have no direct competition. No one else can do what we do. All we need is 2% of the market. We'll be in cash flow positive in 12 months. Our contract with Walmart will be signed next week. I'd be happy to turn over the reins to a new CEO. I'd say those are really common problems that often creep up inside of presentations.
Great, I love those. I want that list to be able to share with entrepreneurs. How about you, Michael? What have you seen?
Yeah, those are great lines. And I would say most entrepreneurs are very ambitious and want to change the world, but you need to be self-critical. Like if you have a team that's trying to change the world but can't see their faults before the competition does, they're screwed. And so all those little bits of your plan, you have to have thought them through. And I think if you've got a good team, you can do that. If you're an individual, it's going to be tough, but you've got to be willing to reach out to people with different perspectives. And I think that teamwork ethic is really critical. So we try and celebrate teams. Usually there's a leader, but unless they're really responsive to a diversity of talent and viewpoints, it's not going to go anywhere. If they have that, those issues that have just been raised, I think will usually be picked out in good time. So we really look for that teamwork. There are all sorts of reasons to fail. This is a convoluted journey, and often in biotech or energy, you're looking at a 10-year horizon. And so, your patent is your first step maybe, but you're gonna have to live with this team for a long time. So finding teams that really have trust is and the right diversity of skill sets is critical. So once they have that, they'll probably see that there are a bunch of holes in their team. And I think you want to find out that they understand that they don't have everything they need yet. So probing them to be honest. You got to be humble in this business and grow straight. People can get tied up in knots by trying to think they're going to rule the world and dominate a billion-dollar market overnight. It takes a lot of time. And at the other end of the day, you want to have happy customers. And so not knowing your customer's pain is a real problem. You've got to understand what people are trying to deal with and what they're willing to pay money to solve with your widget or whatever it is you built. So talk to your market, make sure people have a real need and not just pushing technology.
You've seen holding your pitch event. What would you recommend that some of these founders do differently when they're presenting their story, their idea to the audience?
Sure. I mean, I think they generally should run a couple of practice runs with their best friend just to make sure they got a good story. I think often they're running so fast that they just haven't done their practice run and got their story quite straight. I think you should have your team work through your story with you and make sure that you have a clear ask. We get them pretty raw, so that's all right. But some of them come in very, very polished as well and have a very clear ask, and I've done it 5 times. Some people come back. So basically what we're doing now is that you can do you'll be able to do like a 10-minute session where you do your elevator pitch, get 5 minutes feedback in that 10-minute slot. And then that'll give you kind of a run through, a dry run. It's a bit of going through the fire. So the reality is we want to have a safe place for people to learn. And then people will get a 20-minute pitch once they've got their story a little bit straighter. They presented already once or twice. And so we'll have kind of a gradation, but they should also get their numbers straight. Like if you haven't got a clear idea about how you're going to make money and help benefit your investors or your stakeholders, it's going to be a tough sell to get people to really interested in following up with you. And I think be willing to listen to criticism. I think if people can't take criticism, often some of our teams score straight A's and some of them get B's and a few get C's. We do rank them on the spot. We do an instant poll as well as the Q&A. So being able to get that critical feedback and learn from it, because that's you're getting close to real world experiences now where people will grade you basically on how much they like what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to build. And so being able to get that critical feedback and use it to come stronger the next time. Keep on building your strengths and identify your weaknesses early.
Excellent. Zach, could you maybe introduce yourself? Give us a little bit about your background as well as describe your startup TNT pitch event for the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Happy to be here. I love hosting pitch events. I am the founder of Startup TNT. My background actually is in chemical engineering. I have a PhD from McGill, and I moved out to Alberta to do research at the U of A in chemical engineering. Really wanted to focus on building great companies rather than just building my own research group. And so did an MBA and have been sort of working in the startup community for the last 5 or so years. And 2 years ago, launched what started off as just a happy hour called Startup TNT, actually at Polar Park. I'm wearing their hats. That's where we used to meet. TNT stands for Thursday Night Tradition. Some of you have, I think, joined us there. But at the same time we launched it, which was almost 2 years ago now, I'd heard about this concept of an angel summit, which I think was first launched in Seattle. And the goal of the happy hour was really about bringing entrepreneurs together in a casual way, just have fun, make friends, build companies, just a place that people can always go to hang out and mess around. And the Angel Summit concept is something that seemed like would pair perfectly with a happy hour. The Angel Summit is basically a training system and a fundraising mechanism for local investors and entrepreneurs. So investors get together, they pool their money, they put $5,000 into a holdco. They all work together as a team to conduct due diligence on a company that applies. And then they select one company for investment live at a summit that we run. And so pitching is a big part of it. We actually run fun pitch nights that are just like community pitch nights, kind of informational pitch nights on a regular basis. Just did one last night. And then we incorporate big pitch nights as part of that investment summit process, where one of the companies that's pitching is actually going to raise money from the investment team. And then the biggest pitch night we ever did was this massive Great Alberta Pitch Marathon with 105 companies in a 9-hour marathon over one day last July.
Rus, let me turn to you and just ask you, what do you recommend that entrepreneurs or founders do differently when they're pitching?
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing that Michael said, or at least one of the points was on making sure the numbers add up. I'd say that's a common problem. People don't truly have a good sense of what their business model is. They have an idea or a concept, but and really a business model is different. For two companies that could be very similar in terms of their core technology or offering could have very, very different business models. What one might generate revenue and have key drivers that might be very different from the next one. Know what your business model is and know how it's going to, what the multipliers are to get it to the ultimate growth position you need. Your long-term financial projections, in technology companies, it's hard to project, but you still have to. It to some degree it shows that you have the ability to think through some of these issues more than the due diligence isn't going to be assessing on how accurate all the pieces are, but that you've thought through some interesting business models. Your near-term operating plan, I think, has to hang together well. Your capital requirements have to be clear and reasonable. Your capitalization structure over multiple rounds has to be well thought out, and some of the levers in your profitability and your key metrics, I think, have to be known and articulated properly. And I'd say that you also have to grab people by the throat and keep them there right through your whole presentation. Some people figure that they can build up to some big crescendo at the end. Well, investors will go to sleep and you'll never get them back. You gotta grab them by the throat and you gotta keep them there for your entire presentation. So another way, some people call it bait the hook. Get some strong measure of viability and interest early on and keep people there. I'd say those are some of the material ones. There's certainly a bunch of others, but I'd say those are certainly some key ones.
Great. Well, thanks, Rus. How about you, Zach? What would you recommend? You've done a number of pitch events now. What would you recommend that founders or entrepreneurs do differently?
Well, I've heard some great points from both Michael and Rus. And I want to emphasize the preparation point that Michael made, which is preparing, practicing, and really nailing it, because the pitch is really about telling a story and trying to get someone's attention for a short period of time so you can stand out from the crowd and just get a follow-up meeting. So really like acing that story and trying to connect with your audience, which is very hard in the virtual setting. But, I think there's a lot of information that can come across, and people are only going to remember one or two key points that you're hitting home, and they're going to remember. I think they're going to connect more with feelings that they have during your pitch. So if they're falling asleep, like Rus said, they're not going to remember anything. If it's a really intense pitch and they're like, wow, that was really crazy, they're going to remember that. Can you make it memorable for them, connect with them in some way? Try and be creative to make a memorable impression on people.
Okay. And this is sort of an earlier question. What's the biggest fail you've seen in what founders have done wrong in their pitch?
The biggest fail I remember at pitch event, didn't actually happen at my event, was where the person literally could not remember anything they were going to say, and they literally just froze on stage for a full minute. It was very awkward for everybody. That was probably the biggest fail I've ever witnessed. And then I think, I've seen a few pitches that really don't resonate because there's no enthusiasm, there's no energy, and the person just feels almost like lost on stage. So without naming any names, I've seen a couple of pitches that, just like everyone's just feeling almost like cringing. Like, can this person I wish this person would stop. And then they always end up going longer than the time allows, and you have to make them stop anyways. And so there's a big fail.
I'd like to shift the discussion a little bit beyond pitching and maybe talk a little bit about Alberta itself and the environment here for entrepreneurs, investors, and I'd like to get your thoughts on our province's ability to encourage startups to do three things: to start here, to grow here, and then, if successful, to stay here. Michael, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. I mean, when I came here, I thought, wow, what a great university, a great place to live. I was in the UK where the weather was variations on 13 and it was always gray and cloudy. And here you got blue skies and people think big, mountains to climb, and you want to get things done. So it has the right culture, and you just cannot buy that. You can't just make it. It's either here or it's not. So I think you've got really a great environment. People complain about money, but at the end of the day, and people are risk averse, but there is a ton of money out there in Alberta and in Canada, and money is not the limitation. What we want to do is build trust. And there's this real sense in Alberta, we get things done together. And so if you can build trust between someone who has a great idea and someone who has money and someone who has connectivity and someone who has business smarts, what we need to do is build those relationships. And so that's what we're trying to do. And the government, of course, you know, they are going to be risk averse. And some of these projects take 10 years and $1 billion. Look, it's not easy. So you got to find a way to chop that up into, you know, go with grants as long as you can and don't give away equity. And then when you're ready to fly, get that team ready and get a consortium of funders if you need to. We're looking at nuclear fusion. That's a $1 trillion problem, but we might be able to get that done. So, and the government might be willing to fund these things. They're funding hydrogen energy. So you got to build your team, get your consortium. It might take a year or two, but you can do it if you get the right partnership. And I think that's what Alberta really has. We've got a special sense. This is a special place where we work together. We shoot high. We're practical, close to the ground, but we also climb mountains together. So I think it's a great place and it's got a great future, but don't get bogged down in the pessimism. I've seen a lot of no can do places. This is a can do place. So let's get it done. Let's do it together.
Great. Thanks, Michael. How about you, Zach? What do you see in the province here?
Yeah, I like that philosophy that Michael has. This is a can-do place. I think Michael and I both have organizations that capture that spirit. Let's just go out and do things, you know? And I think something that Michael hit on, which I would like to emphasize, is the importance of the interactions and the relationships that you form. And I think that for both of our two organizations, when we do, we're trying going at that in similar types of ways. Like the pitch events that we run are really like a way to showcase what's going on and gain new connections. And then we do a happy hour that follows. You know, Discovery Lab does something similar in a different format with like a longer format, but it's about building relationships and finding people that can help you. And, you know, the more efficiently we can connect different types of people, I think that's really the key to building a thriving startup culture.
Great. How about you, Russ?
I'd say the province has come a long way in the last 20 years. Back when we started Ventureprise years and years ago, it's decades now, there was very limited infrastructure and resources and capability and skills and very few people that had built in businesses that you could rely on for good, meaningful advice. I'd say that there's a lot more of that now. There are programs that hit the mark, that actually make sense, that contribute in the right ways. And then there's support groups like what Michael and Zach have, that organizations that can help, get people kickstarted a little bit. There's some accelerators. Some of the things that Alberta Innovates are doing are fantastic. So there's lots of programs. The government's more and more leaning towards helping and being a contributor and a resource, a meaningful one to support initiatives and the financing. So I know some of the investment groups Mark, yours probably as well, that have been able to take advantage of some of the things that the government's putting forward to help launch meaningful funds and programs. Without those, I don't think you have the ability to scale the way you need to. And there's a lot of smart people around. And like Zach mentioned, I think one of the biggest failures or challenges are that people get holed up in their office or home or wherever, and don't go out and connect and engage. The notion of collisions and finding opportunities that arise out of connecting with people, I think can't be understated. There's value in that, and you can't afford to spend all your time doing it, but you need to allocate a certain amount of time to that exercise. I see so many opportunities that I get involved with in some way or another, and there's a couple of really substantial gaps that come up after a really quick perusal that they would have addressed had they interacted with guys like Michael or Zach or others, or the team that they're associated with. They would have probably gotten rid of those and not wasted a whole bunch of time.
Great, thanks. I think Perry wants to make an observation here. Perry?
I think it's a good point to summarize a couple of observations that I'd like to share with all of you. And that was, I go back to the late 1990s when I got wind of the fact that the province was committed, it seemed to be formally committed to diversification, and to recognize that the Alberta Research Council was one of those instruments that might help in the process, and that universities in Calgary and Edmonton had great research centers, and we had great human resource capital. And I was engaged as a consultant from KPMG to work with the industry liaison office at the U of A. And what did not impress me was there was only one strategy, and that was to get money from government. And the point that I made was, if you're going to make headway, you got to build a relationship. And it isn't a relationship just with government, it's a relationship with community. Building relationships throughout the community. If you think about a network as a web of interconnected people who all have something to say about some topic that they're all interested in, that's the building of a network. But in the late 1900s, and when Rus was just showing up, nobody even knew what a freaking angel was. I mean, we have come a long way in 20 years. And that may sound like a long while to a lot of people. I get goosepimples thinking about it. But we did not have the networks that we have today. We didn't have the vocabulary we have today. We didn't have the appreciation that it wasn't just money. It was money, marketing, management, manpower, moxie, mergers, marriages. There were a lot of things that were going to be necessary to address the issue of the value of death. The fact that most commercialization died in the laboratory. That academics needed to appreciate that it was relationships even more than product that was ultimately going to make a company successful. So when I see what Zach has done, and I saw the passion that Rus has never given up on in 20 years, and I see the arrival of people like Deborah and the number of people that we can bring to a session like this, I'm reminded of one very particular moment in my life where I was at the Glenora, and I had been bringing academics from the University of Alberta, typically students, to the podium to present at a dinner their business ideas and to coach them about one thing: do not ask for money. Someone in this room will have something that you don't even know yet you need, and give them an opportunity to meet you. And Wayne Karpoff came to me one day and said, "You've been doing this for a couple of years and you're bringing in 100 people. What are you doing?" And it was a pointed question. It was quite personal. I was a little bit taken aback. What am I doing? I'm at the podium doing what I like to do, introducing people, being a bit of a ham, and having a reasonably good time and a nice dinner. And then I thought about it. And I said, Wayne, very few people in this room even know one another. I'm building a network, and that network will be critical for them doing business together on things that they hardly know anything about: emerging technologies, the relationship with the university. We're essentially strangers to one another, and our institutions, they may say things in their vision statement, but have very little relationships and experience. And I said, it's the building of networks. And that's what triggered then the formation of the Alberta Council of Technologies, which over the years, went about building 20 different industry associations or networks, from fusion energy to cell therapies to electrification of transportation. I mean, the number of emerging technologies that Alberta has a chance to capitalize on, and the relevance of the universities as a brain center, how to get that out. And I said, it isn't the universities our problem, it's our community that doesn't know how to pull that stuff out.
Well, thanks, Perry. I appreciate that. One of the other questions that I wanted to just follow up on is the third part of my question. So what would it take? Like, what does Alberta need to do to help these successful startups stay here, rather than move off to Silicon Valley or move off to Toronto or Vancouver? What can we do to help some of these companies stay in this province? Rus, can we start with you?
Well, that's a tough question for me, because on one hand, I think we try too hard to keep them. I think they need to go where they need to go. They need to do what they need to do in order to achieve the ultimate success that's right for them and their business. And thinking too hard about keeping them is maybe the wrong question. It's what can we do to just make sure that they're successful? And in the end, if they're successful and this is a home to them, and they've raised their families and have uncles and aunts and cousins here, they'll find their way back. So we don't need to fear too much about that. However, ultimately, to grow the industry, you have to have a series of meaningful things, one of which is you have to plug in good mentors, advisors, and managers into a program. You got to be able to bring skills at a high enough level, and if you don't have them, that's one of the things that they're going to have to go out and get. You can't scale a company to $1 billion company if you can't find a good person to run your marketing team, or a good person to run your business development team, or frankly, even some of the engineering or manufacturing that's required for some of these products or devices. If you have to go to some foreign location, or even down to Boston or Silicon Valley to scale your innovation, then you just have to do that. So we do have to find a way to determine what the needs are of the companies, and then make sure we can connect those needs up with those businesses as best as we can. And the only way we do that is there's a little bit of research and effort that has to go in, and you need forums and processes like this to pull it out of the companies where their problems are, and then to gather them up in an intelligent way and make sure you deliver them to those companies.
Great, thanks. How about you, Zach? What do you think of that notion?
You know what? I think Rus is hitting on a lot of the points. We at Startup TNT, we really focus on those early stage companies just as they're developing. So I think the question is, how do we get companies to stay here? And I think it's like, if we look at the continuum of the companies, starting from when they're first incorporating and raising, or when they're first doing their first round, maybe I'll say, when they're first raising money, to maybe when they're like a little bit larger now and scaling. How do we get them to stay here through that entire process? I think we at Startup TNT really focused on those companies when they're raising their first seed round, and trying to get a broader group, a broader pool of sophisticated investors that are interested and able to company invest in those companies, so that an Edmonton company that wants to raise money knows that they can do it here in Edmonton, and there's sophisticated people here that can do it and help them do it. That's one of the big focuses we have. But I think as they grow, Rus is hitting on a lot of the key things that they need, which is often access to talent, access to very specific sector expertise. And I think that, we need to either, increase our competencies as a community in some of these skills that these companies as they grow need. Craig Elias down in Calgary actually has a big vision about this, about, sort of training people at a young age to feed into the future technology system that we're creating. And then the other one is maybe a little bit more immediate, but like giving them access to those sector specific resources that they might not have access to here in Edmonton. So I wear another hat with the Edmonton Regional Innovation Network. And one of the programs we have, I think, is a really awesome program that actually, Mark, you might be a part of, is the coach program, where companies can basically get up to 100 hours of service with a coach, honestly, if they're choosing, and coaches can come from anywhere in the world. And a lot of them use it to access like sector specific expertise. Like I know there's one company, Interfaith Fluidics, graduated from Techstars, has raised a few $1 million there in the coach program, and they use it to get support on figuring out their B2B marketing strategy. So all that in there. If you don't mind, I want to just follow up on one thing, or on one note that from Perry's conversation there.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind. Perry, I think, sometimes I think we forget, especially younger people like me, forget how much work someone like you have done in the ecosystem over the last 20 years and the groundwork that you've laid so that people like me can start coming in here and building new things on top of that. And I share so much of your philosophy, and I just want to give like one really simple, interesting story here. Oh, my computer's about to die. Just a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with someone that Perry introduced me to, who just sold his company, and now he wants to invest some of that money back into the ecosystem, wants to join us at Startup TNT. And I know that Perry has been a huge supporter of that company. He's got nothing but amazing things to say about the support he's from Perry and the ecosystem, and now he wants to give back. And so I just want to say, like, I think we're continuing the work in new ways on the ground that you've laid for us all, Perry. So thanks so much for that.
Let me pick up on that. I mean, thank you for the recognition. That's not the point. The point has been the excitement that I get of seeing development occur, of seeing relationships getting built. That company that you're talking about, the reason I invested in them, and I'll tell you, it wasn't the pitch. As much as I believe that pitch is an important part of the process of growing and developing and being ready, it's just the beginning. It's not the end. And I hope those that coach people who go into pitching appreciate that what you're doing is building your first and the beginning of a relationship. It was Phil Schrag who said to me, he will not invest in a company until he gets to know the players for about 6 months. He wants to make sure they're not naive about the forming, norming, storming, performing, about running away and getting interpersonal versus addressing what the baby needs. But coming back to Zach's point, that company that sold echoed the same thing we heard from Laurie Schultz, who just sold Galvanize for $1 billion in Vancouver. And his message was, the real contributors to the building of the innovation system are those sometimes who sold off to companies in the US. But those companies in the US opened up their Canadian practice here with that same labor. In other words, they didn't take the company into the US. They capitalized on what we had here. And those employees wanted to stay here. So she said it was her employees that were going to be the next round of angels that had the experience of being part of a startup and knowing what it takes, but also having the capital that they got as a selling of their shares. That company that sold off is going to take 5% of the earnings by the shareholders and reinvest it and grow another round of innovation in Edmonton. That is great news, because some years ago, and I can think about, I won't name the company, when it sold, everybody who won moved to Arizona and bought airplanes and cars and planes and houses. Our entry, that was nouveau riche. We are beyond nouveau riche now. It's not new rich taking their money for self. And it isn't the concept of giving back. It's the thrill and the fun of growing companies. That's Zach, what's driven me, is this is really more damn fun than raising kids. And don't tell my wife that.
I agree with that sentiment for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. Michael, how about you on that sort of question of what Alberta could do to help companies stay here? Or maybe that's not the relevant piece of it.
Well, I think 3 things. Firstly, I think what Perry has done again in networking is really fantastic. We've got to break down those silos and make sure people work at the interface. That's where the sparks fly and things grow. So for our events, anybody can present on any topic, any field, any stage, any level, PhD student, CEO, they all get 20 minutes or 10 minutes. So We got to keep it open. It's really important. And I think it's what we do in Alberta well. I think the second thing is infrastructure. We got a great city. I think there are probably people here who run great companies that make it a great city, whether it's roads or buildings or companies selling all sorts of things. What you're doing counts because it brings people here. The third thing is brand. Edmonton doesn't sell itself well. People think it's a cold place where hockey doesn't always, we don't always win, and we got tar sands. We got a negative reputation, and we got to fix that because this is a beautiful city, great infrastructure, great quality of life. And so I think if there's one thing we got to do better right now with this new government, the new mayor, is sell this city. It's a beautiful story. Edmonton Global's on it, but I don't think we've cracked it. And at the end of the day, we all have to be ambassadors for what we love about Edmonton. And because half the growth is going to be companies coming here, new employees, new skill sets, new technologies. We want to grow our own, definitely, but the growth is going to come because more people want to come here as well. So let's sell this place. I love it. I've only been here 5-6 years now, but it's a great place to grow up. My family's grown up, and I do love my kids, and I try and balance it out. And you can do that here. You can have a great company and great kids at the same time.
Look, I'll mention something there, Michael, which you may never have thought about. Edmonton, when I was working for KPG, had the highest productivity level in the entire country because we didn't have mountains and oceans to play with on Friday. Now, I say that in jest, but the reality is the work ethic in this region is phenomenal. People like their work, and maybe it's because they don't have a lot of distractions. But that sells. And when companies are looking for a place to locate, there's a phenomenal value in talking about the work ethic and productivity. It's still a great place to live. I mean, that's what the arts and that's what Austin sold, to make sure you had a viable community, a viable arts center, all of those things as well. And I think we've got that. But there's a very high work ethic in this region. That's important.
Mark, I'll interject something else. If you want a big idea, something that, Perry's heard me talk about many times, and others probably at the table have over the years. And that's, I think it never hurts to get smarter. The smarter we can get as a community, the better off we all are. And one of the things that, I think it's in Kansas, but they launched the Kauffman Foundation. That Kauffman Foundation has been the genesis of so many angel investor networks and getting organizations spawned to help seed raising early stage capital, but also understanding better about the entrepreneurial kind of spirit and attitude. And, if, a big idea is if the province was able to, get somebody that's got a lot more money than I do, that, Kate's or some guy that wants to really have a name and create equivalent of a Kauffman Foundation here that focuses on entrepreneurial activity. And I also love the fact, one of the things that Zach's program does, and I'd researched that quite a bit before actually Zach launched it, but my brother was down in Seattle, and he actually introduced the Seattle Angel Group to me, and I kind of started drafting a model, called it Rocket Launcher, and we're going to take a run at it and just never did. But anyhow, the concept is educating people that otherwise wouldn't invest in this community on how to manage, putting money into a deal and participating in it in a meaningful way, and ultimately carrying it through to a full return. But a small enough amount of money, like $5,000, is money that you're not really risking your retirement on, and so you're playing with it. And if you have another 100,000 or two, or that you want to stick in, well, you can always throw that in once you learn how to do a good job with the 5,000. And so the education of investors is as much an important task as educating the entrepreneurs. So getting smarter, I think, is a big idea. How do we get smarter in terms of raising the bar in the whole ecosystem?
Well, that's a great point, Russ. I'd like to almost expand on that a little bit and ask you guys, what do you think is missing from the Alberta entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem that we need to work on? Because is it capital? Is it experienced mentors? Is it government support? Is it just more people? What do you all think is missing? And Zach, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, interesting. I wonder if Michael's going to give a similar answer to me, which is I've launched an organization addressing what I think is missing in the ecosystem, which is what Rus just said, and that's educating high net worth individuals that could be part of the angel investment community and giving them, the confidence and the tools that they need to start investing, and then also doing it, to use Perry's words, so it's more fun than anything they've ever done in their life. They want to keep doing it. So through Startup TNT, we've now raised over $2 million from 100+ investors, including a clean tech summit that we put on in partnership with Actia, where Rus has been, helped launch many years ago. So I think, to me, that's like one of the big challenges I see for a place like Alberta, where there is a lot of wealth here. Undoubtedly, I think there's, per capita more, or the most wealth here than any other province. But a lot of it doesn't have the kind of experience investing in, tech startups or fast growth startups that other ecosystems have. And so, to the point of getting smarter, that's where I think we need to get more sophistication around, what are good practices around angel investing? How does it actually work? And then building relationships with people that can do it together and go in on the great deals that are all going through discovery labs, because eventually they're going to need to raise money. We want to know about them.
That's a great point, Zach. I mean, if we could cultivate a interest of Albertans in the future of Alberta. I mean, government today serves as the intermediary between the taxpayer. If we could get directly to the citizens of this province about the relevance that they could play in helping develop our future for their kids, boy, that would be one hell of a bridge, because then we don't have to go through the government as an intermediary, and we can get them directly involved.
Well, Perry, I'm going to come back to you on that, because I'm going to need your network and your help to launch that exact thing.
In other words, you want my money.
Well, your network and their money.
No, I mean, that I'm all in. I mean, to me, that was the ultimate. We knew we needed to build constituency, because this is a democracy, and a great idea has to have a market behind it. So we needed to build constituency behind the relevance of emerging technologies and commercialization. I think that's underway, but we haven't yet woken up the individual citizens and found the way to get them to commit. And the way I think it can be done is to hit the baby boomers, who have over $1 trillion of wealth to transfer between generations, and make damn sure that government doesn't hit them with a wealth transfer tax, but sees if that money goes back into reinvesting. That's the tax advantage. And I think that's the way to get the citizens and the baby boomers to show the model, because there's $1 trillion out there.
Yeah, and I think there's real opportunity for a place like Alberta, Perry, where where most people that have a decent amount of wealth, where is that wealth? A lot of it's invested internationally in the stock market, and if we can give an opportunity to redirect some of that into our own ecosystem.
Look, the stock market in Canada is giving money to Toronto to invest in Toronto. Yeah. I mean, we don't have a stock market here in Edmonton, but we've got U of A, we've got all this infrastructure now present. If we can get in front of individual citizens about the investment opportunities. I mean, the company that I was just involved in selling, that has made some young people under 30 years of age millionaires. That's what excited Silicon Valley. So we've got a chance. Calgary's on a roll. A little more difficult than Edmonton, because it has such a strong public sector, which is very much about administration and not quite entrepreneurial. So I think the biggest challenges are ours here in Edmonton, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth addressing.
Michael, how about you? What do you see missing in the ecosystem?
Well, I think the key thing is someone who's been there, done that. You need these kind of people. And if you walk down the street in the Bay Area, you'll run into them on the street. You go to a party, you'll drink with a dozen of them in one night. It's hard to do here. So, but on the other hand, we have within this community, by and large, what we need, whether it's space, someone who's a contact in California or Boston, or I think at the end of the day, we can do it. It's a big enough place that we can get rolling. And the rest of the talent we can bring in. The reality is these companies are global by and large. Even if they're selling something small, they're thinking globally. And so pretty soon you got to bring the world here one way or another. you're not going to get all your talent here. So, but I think having those events where you can bring people in and build trust, the expertise in this room, for example, I'm sure there's people here who have built companies, been there, done that. We need you at Discovery Lab. We need your skills. We need you to build a relationship with a student that's trying to start out a company and just has needs a bit of guidance to get around some corner. A contact that you may have may make all the difference. And so just your willingness to share a little bit, it's not money. I mean, the money is great too, but your skills are worth a lot more than the cash that you may think you want to share. And so if you're willing to spend a bit of time with a student, a postdoc, or a professor who just doesn't understand your sector, but needs to reach their market, we'd love to have you come to the events. So I think it's really about those people who have diverse skill sets that want to come together and building that trust, that team early on, so people don't make the wrong mistakes early on, but can really connect well. And companies grow through stages, but at that early stage, a couple good advisors that can help you get around those corners and find the straight and narrow where you can grow. That's critical.
Yeah, thanks. Russ, how about you? What's your take? Is it really capital that you think is missing in Alberta here?
I'd say capital is always an issue. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'd say capital is always an issue of some sort, but to one degree or another. But I'd say the one that hasn't been touched on is access to the customers. One of the problems are we're so geographically kind of separated from the big markets. It's a big hurdle to overcome, and the world's gotten smaller over the years, so you can now access lots of. I remember when I built our first tech company and raised a bunch of money, we were doing it in all four corners of the world, and Australia and and Asia and in the US. And so we were doing lots of traveling, and it was a tough job, and our customers were all in those places too. That was a lot of work getting to them. Now, in the last year, most people have met their customers and their investors by Zoom, so the world kind of has gotten a little bit smaller, but it's also, again, taking out of the equation the inability to fly. But, so going back into 2019, it was pretty easy to get to most quadrants of the world. It wasn't that difficult. Years ago, it was much more difficult. So it's gotten easier, but I think if we in Alberta can find ways to engage or connect with people that are even closer, so you can actually drive or walk. If the bigger businesses had more of an open door, and were inviting for innovators to pitch and present, and we've done a little bit of that with Actia. One of the things we tried to do before we brought Zach in to do the summit, we cut our teeth on really matchmaking events, is what we called it, and we were bringing corporate investors into the room, because they're a form of investor. There's only two ways you get money. It's either from an investment or from a sale. And so if you can somehow get into if you can get into a customer early enough and start paving a path to success there, that replaces the need for capital, and potentially also increases your valuation. So when you do get capital, you can get it at better terms. So getting access to those customers, and there's ways you can do that. We've got some, we're talking about investor forums with the two, Zach and Michael at the table, but getting companies to come in and participate in these hackathons or strategic kind of relationship building events, I think is an activity that's still underdeveloped in the province.
Great. Well, thanks, Russ. I'd like to ask sort of a bit of an off-topic question, but some of the stuff that you guys have been saying triggered it for me. What do you see happening with this whole notion of being able to communicate now online with each other, Zoom calls? Do you see this going away once COVID, the risk of getting COVID is lessened, everybody's gotten vaccinated? Are we going to go back to where it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, or is this here to stay? Michael, what do you think?
Well, I mean, pandemics are going to be back. This is not the last pandemic, I can tell you. So we got to get used to this. And it's going to be a long haul. So on the other hand, you know, I can have a conversation that feels kind of face to face with 40 people that I don't know, and it feels, you know, genuine. I can understand where you're coming from. You can ask me a question, and I really value that. I've never had that. I'm actually pretty introverted. This would be really painful for me at a bar, trying to connect with as many people. So I think that's a plus. On the other hand, you know, people do want to build trust, and there's no substitute for having that physical connectivity. And so we're going to go back to having physical meetings as well. And they're great fun because you can meet people in ways that are just impossible online, and build a deeper relationship at first than you can just meeting somebody cold online. I'm sure there's a lot of great stories here. And if I met some of you in the corridor, we could have a chat about, you know, what's creating opportunities for you, or what's creating difficulties for your plans, and we could just have a private conversation. To do that right now is going to be a little tricky. So those side conversations are critical. So we want to go back to having a mix of both. And I think that hybrid online, offline experience is going to be interesting. We have to really optimize that. But I think this is actually a big improvement, this ability to connect with a lot of people, a lot of potential customers. At the end of the day, each company that I've built, we did it one customer at a time. And you can do that much easier now if you're online, and if your technology works that way. Get that feedback early, and that gives you a healthier way to grow, frankly. So I think it's basically better by most counts, even though, you know, for some people it's a bit difficult. I think this issue of empathy, can we really understand our team, our customer, and build that deep relationship? I think that's what's really, really important. And if we can continue to build tools that allow us to be empathetic with each other, that would be great. I think the world has become more empathetic as we're dealing with climate change, more complex problems that require really concerted behavioral change. So hopefully we can get there by having these sort of mass forums, while recognizing the importance of the individual action. Translated 100 times, you're starting to get to collective action that can make a difference. Multiply that by another 100, and pretty soon a city can start to be a leader in something that they weren't a leader in. So we can pivot cities now by working together in a way that was not possible 10 years ago.
Great, thanks, Michael. How about you, Russ? What do you think? Are we going back to where we were 2 years ago?
I'd say it never, when things like this happen, you know, they force us out of our comfort zone and what we were doing, what we did before, and we learn about ourselves and learn about how we can do things differently and be efficient in different ways. And that learning stays with us. It doesn't go away. And I'd say there's some good things that we've learned in terms of our ability to make connections and engage in different ways. So we're not going to, I don't think, ever go back entirely. But at the same time, you know, ultimately, an investment and or a customer is made because of a trust between two parties. If two parties look at each other or feel a sense of, you know, confidence in each other, and that's hard to build over, you know, across the two-dimensional plane. I think you need that interface and interaction to ultimately scale the way that that a company that's in a high growth mode needs to scale. So, and to raise the amount of capital that you ultimately need to raise. So I think when people are able to reconnect, you're going to see them reconnecting more. They're not gonna stay disconnected like we are, because they won't need to. And this is an imperfect situation that we're in, and we're making the best of it. Ultimately, we need to, when things change, people are going to want to go back and make sure they can still connect appropriately.
Great.
Hello, I can contribute a little bit to this, Mark.
Sure. Sharon?
We're going into a hybrid world for sure. It's not going back to the way we were ever again. So we probably want to get used to this. The research is telling us that Russ is right, by the way. This is an unnatural state for us to be able to be talking to screens and looking at ourselves constantly and understanding how our face conveys emotion and or our voice conveys emotion. But the research is telling us, of course, that we do want to connect with each other, and that's so very important. We're human after all. The research is telling us that the hybrid situation will probably see smaller meetings, face-to-face meetings coming back when we're prepared to close a deal, for example, or if we're having to have one-on-one conversations and meetings. But one-to-many will probably use this type of Zoom collaborative presentation style. The challenge is that we need to upskill everybody in this new environment so that they are comfortable speaking to screens and learning how to speak to screens and how to use their voice and their body movements and body presentation for screens. So that's what I would want to say about your question to hybrid. I do have something that I'd like to say about your question about keeping entrepreneurial lifeblood going here for Greater Edmonton. In my experience, we're very much a small business city. There's two divides here. We're a small business city and we're a big institutional city here. Lots of big institutions thriving in Greater Edmonton, many institutes of higher learning, that kind of thing. They're not necessarily prone to growing Edmonton because of course, their business and their clientele is global. So do they really need to invest in Greater Edmonton? Probably more on the shoulders of the small business person gathered here today. And I am thinking that, where we see, and this is a constant challenge, is that the entrepreneur will show up and say, we need sales and marketing, we need growth for our company. Yes. Do you have a pipeline of clientele? Well, not really, not yet, but we're getting there. We've got a great product. Edmonton has great minds, great scientists, great medicine, great innovative thinkers, but we do not have the product funnels yet set up properly. And the investors could come along. Russ could do that with his eyes closed. If he had, and if he knew that that company had a pipeline of acceptable clientele, customers ready to go and ready to reach. We don't have that. So if we could take this brain trust that we have here with so many smart people, entrepreneurs, small business people, medium business people, and get a SWAT team instead of looking for investors right away, get a SWAT team and help them build their funnels properly, and then bring in the investors. That's what I say.
Well, thanks, Sharon. Zach, how about you on the hybrid question? Are we going back to where we were before?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to predict the future, but my guess is that the online, we're going to get more used to doing things online, and it's going to play a role in our future. But I don't know. Personally, I can just speak for myself. Online works in some situations, but I do kind of miss being at the office at least a couple of days a week. So I could see myself working one or 2 days a week from home. I'm a little nervous that I'm going to go back to work at my office, and I'm just going to have Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting at my office, and then I'll be back home.
Now we're beginning to get into a wrap up. So let me make some additional observations. We have a survey in the market, which, as many of you know, we do every 6 months, and we've been doing since 2015. It demonstrates, I think, that we have networks now. We are finding ways to build and to connect entrepreneurs with investors and mentors and markets. And so part of the survey does touch on the effectiveness of the innovation ecosystem.